Welcome to the Digital Maddy Show. This is a platform where I share my knowledge on video creation, how to generate organic traffic, and how to make sales through video making. I also invite many influencers and digital marketers on this show and ask amazing questions to extract their secrets of business. Let's get started with your host. Hi, my name is Mithyl and I'm a YouTube and video creation coach, and I help aspiring video influencers to generate organic traffic and how to make sales through video making. Today we have an amazing guest on our show. She is a trainer, a parent trainer. She is going to give lots of values related to parenting. She is already into our studio. Let's welcome her. So let's welcome on our show, Melissa. Let me introduce herself. She is a certified professional life coach and an essential oil specialist. She is empowered to connect parents, trainer, writer, and a speaker. She is also the co-host of the podcast, The Adoption Connection. So let's welcome Melissa to our show.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Most welcome. So let me ask you one of my favorite questions, Melissa. Can you share one of your favorite quote or a line that motivates you on a daily basis?
Yeah, you asked me that before we started recording, and you kind of caught me because I was like thinking, oh, what is that? But I do have a parenting quote that really guides my decisions. When I help parents, we really try to find what I call high structure, high nurture solutions for challenging behaviors. And so one of my mentors and favorite authors, who's no longer with us, her name was Dr. Karen Purvis. And she would say that if we give our kids structure when they need nurture, then we inhibit their ability to trust us. But if we give nurture when they actually need structure, then we're inhibiting their ability to grow. And so just a good reminder of the balance that's needed when we're parenting.
Awesome. So I think by the quote itself, I can feel that the interview is going to be rocking, and all the people who are parents and who are listening to this particular episode, they're going to learn a lot from this episode. So thank you so much, Melissa, for being on the show. Can you share something about your backstory to us?
Sure. So my husband, Patrick, and I live about 2 hours north of DC in the States. And we started off like a lot of families. We got married. We had 2 kids by birth. And then we started down this road of adoption. I'm actually an adult adoptee, and my husband had always wanted to adopt. So in 2009, we brought home a 2-year-old from Korea. And we thought we were great parents. We had this 3-year-old and 5-year-old who we thought were pretty, fairly well behaved. And the tricky part is that our little guy from Korea, nothing that had worked with our first 2 kids worked with him. And so we kind of had to relearn parenting all over again, understand what it meant to parent a child with special needs and challenging behaviors. And so that really reshaped the things that we learned in that process. And we became parent trainers. Taught us so much more about psychology, about how people think and behave and work, and gave us so much more compassion. And so that was the beginning of that work. And, here we are over a decade later, helping other people understand behavior better so that they can respond better. And I specifically work with parents, but that's, in business relationships and family relationships and friend relationships. It's really changed the entire way we see the world.
Great. Nice to know that, Melissa. So since you are as a parent trainer, more of the question today I'm going to ask is related to parenting, so that because there is no guide or a road which has to be followed, and each child is different, even though you may have some guidelines to follow it. So how do you recommend parents to define success?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, Mithyl, do you have kids? I think you have.
Yes, I have a daughter.
You have a daughter? Okay, so I'll turn the question to you. If you think about like a successful day in parenting, or just in general, how would you define success?
Oh my God, this is my test now. Success is, for me, will be participating and trying to learn something from it. Even though you win or lose, that's not the matter at all.
Yeah, I love that. So what I love about your definition of success is that a lot of it has to do with you, something you have control over, right? Your participation in the process. And I found myself feeling like a failure early on when we had so many challenging behaviors before we relearned how to parent, because I was really defining success based on how my kids were acting, right? Like I felt like the world was also defining success that way. Like if my kid acted out at preschool, that a teacher was looking to me to say, okay, this is what happened today. Now you go home and fix it. And I also feel like I defined success as, I didn't necessarily need my kids to be doctors or engineers, but I wanted them to be respectful, contributing members of society. And some of our kids, because of their special needs, will not be able to even live up to a pretty simple definition of success that we think we might have. And so I really encourage parents to think about this concept of success, because I think it really shapes how we deal with day-to-day decisions we have to make with our kids, and define success in a way that you as the parent have control over. So again, it's icing on the cake if our kids are well behaved or they become contributing members of society, but all of our kids are not capable of that. And some of them will make decisions on their own that we can't control, that won't necessarily reflect or define our success as parents. I believe wholeheartedly that we can do everything right and still have kids that make their own decisions and do things that we might not want them to do. So so I have a download and a training about that kind of walks parents through how to rethink their definition of success, because I really think that's a jumping off point for so many other solutions that we're looking for in parenting.
Awesome. So yes, when we have kids, and sometimes they have good behavior, sometimes they have bad behavior, and as parents we do not know at the very first experience how do we deal with the bad behavior. So what do you wish parents knew about bad behavior, Melissa?
So I think, again, I used to think bad behavior was a reflection of either my child's character, right? I think we grow up with certain values about things like lying or cheating or whatever it is, right? And we believe that there are certain types of people who lie, steal, cheat, hit, disrespect. I mean, whatever the challenging behavior is, right? Back talk. And so a lot of times our values bumping up against those behaviors kind of stops us from seeing the behavior from what it really is. So what I wish that parents knew about behavior, and this is not just your kids' behavior, but really all behavior, is that behavior is telling us something about that person, about what their internal state of being is, what their physical needs are. So behavior really is communication. Now, it's not the communication that's appropriate, right? We want to be able to shift our kids to a behavior or a style of communication that's more acceptable. Words would be great. But, if we start with the premise that behavior is communication, then that gives us a lot more options for how to deal with it other than just like threatening and punishing.
Wow. Awesome. Thank you, Melissa, for giving that awesome reply for that. So kids do misbehave, and definitely there is something psychological going behind that. So Melissa, can you throw some light on what are the 5 reasons kids misbehave?
Yeah, so that's what I teach. There really are only 5 reasons that kids misbehave, which is crazy, right? We think about all the different things that are going on in the world, but we can really distill it down to 5 things. And that's helpful for parents because our minds are tired and we're busy. And so it gives us a kind of a framework to work through. And so the 5 reasons are: 1, that kids might have something physical going on, that they might be tired, hungry, thirsty, sick. And if any of those things are going on, then our kids are not going to be able to make the best decisions. And if you think about how just we are as adults, if we're sick or grumpy because we're tired or we're hangry, right? With that, we need food. We're not our best people, right? At those times. So that's the first thing. The second one is this idea of felt safety. So we all have a part of our nervous system called neuroception. It's constantly scanning our external environment and our internal sensory things to tell the rest of our body and the rest of our brain, are we safe or are we not safe? And we have to kind of take logic out of the equation, because most of the time we're looking at our kids and they're they're actually pretty safe, right? They have a roof over their heads. They're being fed 3 to 20 meals a day, right? We're taking care of them, but there might be something in their nervous system that's scanning something. They might have a fear and anxiety. And so their nervous system's communicating to them, I'm not safe. And so that might trigger them into something like fight, flight, or freeze. And again, when we're not feeling safe, or we have some kind of anxiety that's overriding the logic in our brains, we are not going to, be polite or act appropriately. The third thing is sensory processing. So our body is constantly scanning for sensory, right? We're seeing things, we're hearing things, we're smelling things, we're tasting things. Our body is sensing where we are in space, right? And all of those things, the brain could have a disorder or a processing struggle in being able to take in that information, process it, tell the brain what it needs to know, and then also ignore the rest of the information. So if our kids are struggling with those sensory things, then they may feel bombarded by lights, sounds, colors, all kinds of things that we might not understand. They're not going to come up to you and say, Mom, like the colors in the room are really bombarding my senses, right? They're just going to feel the anxiety, the angst, the overwhelm of all of that. And then also be, grumpy or more irritable. They may have trouble focusing, things like that. We also have kids that are what we call sensory seeking, right? So their body's not getting as much sensory input as it would like for various reasons. And so sometimes we see kids that are always jumping off of things. They're always moving. They're always tapping, right? And those kids are seeking a certain type of sensory input. The fourth reason is really big emotions. It's a very adult skill, right? To have a really big emotion and not act on it, to, mind over matter, to process it, not let it take us over. And we still see adults, right, in our society that have trouble with that. And so our kids definitely do that. So if they're having big feelings, we're recording this in the time of the pandemic. So if they're having big feelings about not being able to see their friends or not being able to go back to school or being stuck at home all the time, then that can really get in the way of them making their best decisions. And then lastly, I like to remind parents that as much as possible to think about when kids won't do something, to think of it more of a can't, not a won't. So it's a skill, not a will thing. And there's so many skills that we need to acquire as we grow into adulthood. And a lot of these are like executive functioning skills, the ability to start a task and manage your time and remember all the steps to a certain task. And a lot of our kids are having trouble with that, especially if they have diagnoses, maybe like ADHD. And so a lot of times we're asking our kids to do something, and when they don't, we see it as disobedience or like they're refusing, but really they're overwhelmed and they can't. But they're not going to say, I'm overwhelmed, right? They're just going to say, I'm not going to do that, right? So it kind of cloaks itself in this thing. So we have to kind of put our behavior detective hats on, as I like to say, and really kind of think about the deeper things that might be going on.
Wow. Like, parents are not psychologists, and most of the parameters that you just shared do give us the perspective of, yes, we are looking from the point of view of, we can say, psychological perceptions, and only people or parents who are aware of what this exactly is, I think then, yes, we will understand exactly what is going on. So thank you, Melissa, for giving this information. Most of the parents, even kids, misbehave. They resort themselves to punishments and reprimands. So if punishments aren't working, what should parents do?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? Because if what you're doing, so sometimes punishments and threats do work, but we found in our parenting situation that they weren't as effective as we had hoped. And also, we didn't feel like great parents sometimes when we had to do that. So even if we thought it changed behavior, it didn't feel good, right, to take away our child's favorite toy or to, have to put them in timeout or whatever thing is working for your family. Or maybe it's not working, right? So I walk parents through a 4-step process where we kind of reflect and regulate about the behavior and how we're perceiving it. So this goes back to what I was talking about, values and what we think about people who steal or people who act a certain way, right? So we have to think about our own selves, and we have to calm our own selves down, right? Because a lot of times our kids' behaviors cause us to feel really big feelings and emotions. So we have to kind of deal with our own stuff first. And then we can explore. So the 4 steps actually spell out real, REAL, like real life parenting, right? So reflect and regulate, and then explore. And that allows us to go over those 5 reasons that we just talked about and think like, what else could be going on with our child? What might have happened before this thing happened? What might they be worrying about after is happening? Just really taking a very holistic approach, kind of, again, behavior detective hats. And then accommodate rather than threaten and punish. What can we do to help our kids? I often talk about this mindset shift, right? Where a lot of times I felt like, at least when I was growing up, right, it was me and my parents, right? And we were kind of against each other, like we were kind of butting heads about what I wanted, what they wanted. So how can we think about being on the same side as our kids, and we're working together to solve a behavior or to solve a conflict? That collaborative thinking and problem solving will get us so much further with our kids, and we'll both end up feeling like we got what we needed. We want our kids to be respectful and follow the rules and follow through. And our kids want to feel worthy and loved and appreciated and like they're good people. So we can think more about accommodations rather than threats and punishments to kind of help our kids get to where they need to go. I think it's also important to remember, because sometimes it can feel like, well, how will they ever learn, right? And we go back to that quote that I shared at the beginning, that we need structure and nurture so that our kids can both trust us and grow. But Dr. Bruce Perry is a well-known psychologist, and he defines maturity as the sum of positive social emotional interactions that someone has in their life. And so if we think about that, threatening and punishing might teach our, behavior modifier. They might teach our kids a lesson, but they're not super positive, right? We don't think of them as like positive social emotional interactions. So we need to build these things up, because counterintuitively, it's the positive social emotional interactions that move our kids to maturity, not necessarily the threatening and the punishing.
Great. So this is a complete different angle, and all the people who are listening, I think that's going to give a different perception as how to deal with our kids rather than punishing. If we can collab with them and try to work out, I think they can become great human beings, and they don't do the same thing that like if we punish the kids, they're going to punish their kids. It's like something like a repetitive thing. So somewhere if we collab and help them out, I think that is the same thing what they are going to do to their next generation also. Thank you, Melissa, for giving such awesome value. So all the people who are listening, all the parents who are listening to this episode, if they want to connect with you and to know more about you and learn more about parenting, is there a particular platform where they can connect to you?
Absolutely. So I have a special gift for your audience, Mithyl. I talked a little bit about that parenting success plan. So your folks can go to my website to get that, thecorkboardonline.com/digital Maddy, and get that free download. It's a printable worksheet or 2, plus a short training video. And my website is a great place to connect, to get more information, to find me on different social media channels. So thecorkboardonline.com.
Thank you so much for giving such awesome gift. So I would request all the parents who are listening to this particular episode, if you want to have the right parenting ideas and guide, I think that's the link. You can find the link in the description below. So thank you so much, Melissa, for being on the show and giving awesome values. Since we have come to the end of the episode, would you like to say something to our viewers?
Yeah, I would. I co-host an adoption podcast for parents, and we always end it by reminding parents that they're good parents doing good work. Because I think a lot of times with, especially mommy wars and all these things, there's so many ways that we can kind of feel like failures, going back to this idea of success. And so sometimes it's just nice to be validated. And, if you're watching something like this, I always tell parents, the parents who are out researching and scouring the internet for different things, even if you yelled at your kid this morning, doesn't make you a bad parent. And just by essence of being here that you are a good parent and you're doing good work.
Thank you so much, Melissa, for giving such awesome, tips and tricks in the end too. So thank you so much for being on the show and giving us the honor to have you as a guest and giving us lots of values. So once again, thank you so much, Melissa.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
So you have just listened to the Digital Maddy Show with your host, Mithyl Dave, and we have an awesome guest, Melissa, who just gave lots of values related to parenting and kids. So if you want to listen to entire thing, just there are descriptions and there are links in the descriptions. Go there, check it out. Thank you so much, Melissa, for being on the show.
Thank you.